Somebody answer.
So can I start?
Yep, go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So good afternoon, and my name is Manoj Shukla, and I'm a professor at the New Mexico State University. And today I will talk a little bit about the water issues of New Mexico. I'll also bring into the equation some crops, and as we move forward, I may not be able to see if any of you are going to raise your hand with a question. So please do not hesitate to interrupt me. Just ask a question if there are any, and I would be glad to, try to answer to the best of my ability. So let us, you all know, I think, needless to say anything about our state, 47th state. If you look at the geographical area, we are number 5 in the country, but with a very small population of only, little over 2 million. When we look at our economy, it is basically agriculture and oil and gas based. And dairy and cattle ranching are the most important agricultural activities, which really contribute to almost 39% to the economy. We also grow a lot of different crops, of course, alfalfa, hay crops, pecans, because of whatever happened in Georgia and the trees that they lost. New Mexico is currently the number 1 in the country. Otherwise, for pecan production, we are always behind Georgia. We also produce a lot of greenhouse and nursery products. And then we also used to be number 1 in the world in chili pepper productions until, of course, labor issues and other things. Now we are like 3rd and 4th. We also have some acreage under onion. A lot of cotton is grown, and of course, sorghum and wheat. Let us a little bit talk about the water requirements of these crops. So you can see the most of the hay crops are all flood irrigated. There are some areas which are also under drip, especially in the last 6 to 7 years. And hay requires at least 51 inches of water. Pecans definitely need 47. It can go as much as 51 or 52 or even more, but 47 inches is the minimum water requirement. Chili peppers require a little bit less. Again, a lot of it is under furrow irrigation, but there are also some areas where chili peppers is grown under drip irrigation system. And it requires very close to 39 inches of water. Onions, again, mostly furrow, but some drip irrigation, about 32 inches of water. And cotton among all of these crops requires the least amount of water, much more drought and salinity tolerant crop. And it requires, close to 25 to 28 inches of water. Wheat, corn, and sorghum, most of it is grown in the northern and northeastern part of the country. And therefore, a lot of it is under dry land, but they do provide some supplemental irrigation as and when needed. But when we compare it to the rainfall that we are getting, look at here, our annual rainfall is about 9 inches, 9 to 10 inches. And on top of that, sometimes we get thunderstorms. A lot of water comes in a pulse. And therefore, that cannot be considered the same as when the rainfall intensities are much much smaller. So we are under water problem. If for a brief moment we go out and look at the globe and look at the global water scarcity, we very clearly see that, this is where we are. And, this is, northern part of Africa, Middle East countries, Israel and other countries here, and some parts of China here, most of the central India, and also here way down in Australia. The way the water scarcity is defined in this map is that if it is blue, then there is little to no water scarcity. For these dark red areas, it denotes the physical water scarcity where use of all the water resources has exceeded 75%. So more than 75% of all our water resources, we are using it. So this really shows us that, we are definitely, with regard to water, we are under trouble, we have problem. What is the definition of the absolute water scarcity? The absolute water scarcity is defined as the water 15 cubic meter per person. So if the water available is only 15 cubic meter per person, then that country is considered as the absolutely global water scarcity. However, because we live here in the United States, we have a lot of area which is essentially under no water scarcity. So we are, way above this, more than 1,000 meter cube per person. But when you start looking at some of the parts here in the Middle East and some of the parts here in China and India, there are real problems. Jordan is considered as one of the most poor country with about 150 meter cube per person of water available. So, but still, now if we look at the global precipitation map, and this is the average annual precipitation from 1988 to 1996, and North America is here, and we are located somewhere here. Again, we see the same thing. Purple line is less than 1 millimeter of rain per day, and we are there. All of these parts, wherever we are seeing global water scarcity, all of these places, we do see that the precipitation rates are smaller. Of course, you do not see that same pattern here in India, because in India, a lot of monsoon rains take place, and therefore, it falls under 2 to 3. But still, when you are looking at the overall water use, India is also under severe water stress. Now, let's come back to New Mexico. And this is what we know, that whenever we are talking about the irrigation or water availability in the southern New Mexico, Elephant Butte Reservoir, or EBID, Elephant Butte Irrigation District, is the one that supplies all the water for surface irrigation. I know a little bit of a history. This dam was built in 1916. It's almost 92 meter high. The length of this bridge is about 510 meters, and base width is of 69. And when you go back and look at some of the years, and this is the picture from 2013, July 2013, and you can see here that, reservoir has the water which is only 2% of its total capacity of 2.6 million acre feet. This was the scenario in 2015. So July is the time of the year when we actually need a lot of water for irrigation. These are the pictures from August 2016. Again, very similar, 3 to 4% capacity from 2.6 million acre feet. So we do some of the analysis. So we have done a lot of work, and EBID does also a lot of work with regard to the groundwater table and how it fluctuates during months and how it fluctuates, annually. So, and I will show you those analysis in a minute. But if you look at this picture, all of this water level data was recorded from all the wells which are here all the way from tier C to just above Santa Teresa, so inside New Mexico. And I want your attention towards these darker green areas. So May 2014, when Rio Grande River was not flowing. And you can see, very small dark green areas, and there are a lot of areas where this is dark red. Now what happens as soon as the river flows, now what we see that darker green areas are increasing, and these, dark red areas decrease, because what is happening is that there is a good hydraulic connectivity between the river and the groundwater table, and therefore as the river flows, water table comes back up. So that, we see it here, but it is much more clear when we start looking at the salinity of the groundwater. So this is the salinity map of May 2014, before river started flowing. And you can see here that, there are these dark red areas which denote a salinity of greater than 10 ppms. And these are some of the areas where water is much more fresh. So bluer areas indicate a good quality water, and the more red the area is, that is more saline. And look at what happens as soon as the river flows. Now, once you see the river flow, and after few days, 2 to 3 weeks, when we again go back and collect the groundwater samples, now we see this leaching. So all the salt that was accumulated in the soil profile during the previous growing season, because of this fresh water and clean water from Rio Grande, it starts to flush the salt in towards the groundwater table. And therefore we do see that temporarily groundwater salinity increases. Again, this shows that there is a very good hydraulic connectivity between the river and the groundwater table. So what is the problem? This is the problem. And as you can see that in New Mexico, water allocation is based on the area of the field. So if a farmer has 1 acre of land, he will be receiving 36 inch of water per acre from EBID. Our remaining amount has to come from pumping. So generally, on an average, 5 feet of water or 60 inches of water, total water allotment is there, or allocation is there for the farmers, and 36 inches, acre inch per acre, which is considered the full allotment, is provided by the EBID by diverting the water through the canals, and it reaches the farmer's gate. But if you look at here, this data from 2005 to 2021, 36 or full allocation was only provided by EBID once in 2008. 2009, it went down to 30. 2010, it went down to 24. And 2011, it went as low as 4. And then, it slightly increased, and then again. So 2017 is when, 21 acre inch per acre of water was applied, but then again it went down to 9, 14, 14, and this year there is only enough water in the EBID reservoir to provide 4 inches, 4 acre-inch per acre of the water. So, what I was trying to show you, there is a very good hydraulic connectivity between the river and the groundwater table, but the problem is not enough water. There is not enough water, and therefore, as a consequence of that, we have done this analysis also on what is the effect on the groundwater table. And as you can see it here in this map, and we have only done it for, sorry, I'm only showing it for 2009 to 2014, but it's similar done for all the way up to 2021. And you can see here that when water allocation was 24 acre-inch per acre, 2009 to 2010, and this is the data in December, because during the year, water fluctuation takes place quite a bit because of the pumping. So, that is not a good way to describe the how the water table is depleting or replenishing. So best way to do it at the end of the year, when pumping is either there is no pumping, or it's very small amount of pumping is taking place. So when 24 acre-inch of the water was diverted to the farmers, we still saw that the water table went down by almost 0.15 feet. 2010 to 11, water only 4 acre-inch per acre was there, and therefore water table went down further by 3 feet. 11 to 12, because more water was available, still we saw a water table decline. So if you simply add water table decline between 2009 and 2014, we observed that on an average, a water table decline of 7.5 feet took place. So that's an average. Some places it might be 10 or 12. Some places it might be 1 or 2. So on an average, we saw a depletion of 7.5. So very closely related to the supply of water. Now let us look at what is happening with our groundwater table. So we do have a lot of groundwater, no doubt about it. And I will give you the number in a minute, but this is the aquifer map of New Mexico. So if you look at this map, blue means that the total dissolved solids are below 1000 milligrams per liter, or 1000 parts per million, which is known as the potable water, which we can drink very easily. What is TDS? TDS is that, for example, if you take 1 liter of water and you evaporate the water so that all the water is gone, and whatever residues or salts are left behind, you weigh those salts, and as long as the total weight of the salts is less than 1000 milligrams in 1 liter of water, that water is considered as a blue water. It's a really good water. We can drink it, potable water. But then if you look at here, when the salinity or TDS increases from 1000 and 3000, in that range, we call it slightly brackish. And Masiha Valley, although not everywhere, in Masiha it is more than 1000. There are also pockets here where it is even less than 1000, especially here in the Las Cruces area. The salinity might be 700 to 800 parts per million. But in general, all of this area is where water is slightly brackish. And then, this one where you see in the Tularosa Basin and Roswell Basin. So this is, yellowish orange. So this has much higher salinity. The salinity of the water or TDS of water is anywhere between 3,000 to 10,000. And this area here, where also, there are a lot of oil and gas companies located, this has the salinity of even greater than 10,000 parts per million or 10,000 milligrams per liter. I know I'm working with one of the oil company here. Their produced water salinity is very close to 200,000 parts per million. So yeah, this is very extremely high salinity. These are some of the criteria how we define fresh water. Generally less than 500 is the fresh, 1,000 to 10,000 is brackish, more than 10,000 but less than 35,000, which is the seawater salinity, is saline. And then once you exceed 35 to 200 is known as brine. And once it exceeds 250,000, once it exceeds 250,000, then it is known as the salt saturated. So is there enough groundwater in the state of New Mexico? You will say yes, because if you look at total volume of water in the aquifers in New Mexico, it is 20 billion acre feet. What is the problem? The problem is that 75% is too saline. 75% of the water has a salinity which comes in the brackish range, greater than 1,000 parts per million. And only 25% is fresh. So that is the problem. So what will happen? If we continue to irrigate with that water, there is a possibility of seeing something like this. This research was done on the West Mesa site, where all the water that was coming out of the lagoons, exactly opposite to the airport, west of the cheese factory, where saline water was applied to the soil, and therefore, these pockets of high sodium concentration and low hydraulic conductivities were created. And those were very distinct contiguous patches that sodium was causing much less water infiltration into the soil. And if that happens, this will have attendant consequences to the crop. So really the question comes that since EBID does not have enough water, and they are not even able to meet 50% of the irrigation water requirement for southern New Mexico, what are our alternates? Our alternates are that we will have to use the groundwater, because you cannot grow crops with that small amount of water. So can we keep on using the groundwater for the agriculture? That has become a really big question, because we do grow chili, we have lots of areas under pecans, we have also some tomatoes in this area. What does the research show? Research very clearly points out that we cannot, because if we will continuously apply saline irrigation water, we will be seeing a yield decline. Same thing will happen for tomatoes. For pecans, if the water is also all of these three crops, even onion, they are all highly salt sensitive. And therefore, if we continuously apply the groundwater, depending upon where we are in the state and what aquifer we are using for irrigation, and what is the salinity of that water in the groundwater aquifer, we will most likely be seeing a decline in our productivity. So other than is that we change our cropping pattern and we actually start growing halophytes, the plants which actually can tolerate a large amount of salinity. So yeah, that is an option, and these halophytes can also be used to feed the animal. They can all be used as fodder. Even alfalfa is, much more salt tolerant. Triticale is more salt tolerant than alfalfa. So yeah, there are the options. And since dairies are a very important industry of the state, probably we will be able to meet the USDA's objective of food security, because when you talk about the food security, it's not only the grains, but animals become part of that. So yeah, of course, there are options. If the soil salinity really increases so much that no longer, say, chili, look for these crops. And yeah, but this is the problem here on this graph. You do see the alfalfa grows really well when your salinity increases from, say, 500 parts per million to like 3,500 parts per million. And you do see that the same is happening with triticale. But this picture, I want you to pay a little bit close attention. This is the problem. And these are the average data from all of those halophytes, which I showed you the last slide. If you are applying saline water, you are adding a lot of salt. So this much of the salt you are adding because of the salts present in the irrigation water. Now, if you apply enough water, these are the amounts that you will be pushing through the soil, which may or may not join the groundwater table, because it will all depend how deep the groundwater table is. But at least you are pushing these salts through the soil. Now, generally, people believe that halophytes are able to take up a lot of the salt from the soil, and they can remove the salt from the soil. But if you look at the average salt removal, which is, nothing compared to the amounts added or the amounts that are leaching, and therefore you can very clearly see that if we continue to use these waters, our soil salinity will keep on increasing. And we really do not know what will happen, what we will be able to grow eventually. So it seems like that, the way we are doing it right now, probably we may or may not be able to do in the long run, unless, of course, we start to get a lot of rainfalls, or Colorado starts to get a lot of snowfall and precipitation. So we have a lot of runoff coming from Colorado as well as the northern New Mexico. And therefore, our reservoirs are full all the time, and we are able to continuously apply all what 36 acre inch per acre of water. So if that happens, yeah, there is a scenario that in 10 years we'll be able to replenish all of our water tables. Our aquifers will be replenished. We probably will not have any longer a lawsuit with Texas. But if you look at the scenarios right now, we do not see that is happening. So eventually it seems like that probably our options are limited, and we will have to desalinate the water prior to using it for irrigation. And I think, I'm not sure, you probably already know that this is a very small experimental unit in the Biggendorf, Almagordo. This is a brackish groundwater national desalination research facility in Almagordo. Right now, it's a very small plant, but the one newer plant that is going to come up, which will also meet a lot of the water requirement of the city, that plant will be able to produce almost 6 million gallons of water per day, daily. And this is the other facility, which is in the El Paso, Ken Valley Hutchinson's desalination facility. This can produce up to 27.5 million gallons of fresh water daily. This is one of the largest in the world, because most of these bigger, larger plants are located right at the sea coast, and therefore those are the coastal desalination, world's largest inland. Either reverse osmosis, the technology that is followed here versus some other technology, but it seems like that over the long run we will be we will have to use it if we want to have the sustainable agriculture in the valley. And once we have that desalinated water, so either we can use all of that water and divert it to the agricultural fields, or we can simply recharge the aquifers. So after cleaning the water, we can put it back into the aquifer, and therefore later on that clean water can be taken up by anyone. So there are a lot of areas in Doñana and also in other areas where the hydraulic conductivity is very high. Even, I have shown you the riverbed and the water table had high hydraulic connectivity. So those areas and other areas where these things can be done. Or of course, we can directly send the water to the agricultural field, although we probably will have to do some more work in terms of the formulating some new regulations, because right now in New Mexico, treated water is not allowed to be put back into the river or the canal. Of course, East Mesa treatment site does this, they will put all the treated water back into the river, but that is only being done when river is not flowing. So we'll have to come up with some new policy guidelines, and depending upon our water crisis, both NMED and other people are also thinking about it. The other opportunity for us here in the state, that we have a lot of produced water. So when we say produced water, the water that comes out when we pump the oil, and depending upon where you are, if you are in the northern New Mexico, say around Cuba, that water that comes out with oil, and once you remove oil, that water has a salinity of about 10,000 parts per million. So it's not that bad. But when you are in Luna County and some other places, that water is highly, highly saline. So, when it is too saline, it is put back into the aquifers. But when it is not very saline, that water can be treated with reverse osmosis, and when we can get the potable water. So I'm working in some of these oil and gas companies, and we are trying to treat that water and then grow crops, and then we have to show it to New Mexico environmental department that yes, this can work, and this water can be brought into the irrigation portfolio. So a lot of people, including me, are working on those aspects here in California, in some other parts of the world. So let us see. Bottom line is that in a continuous use of the groundwater, saline groundwater, is not the solution, and we will have to look at these treatment technologies, unless of course a drastic change happens, and we have lot more irrigation water available than what we have in the last 20 years. So this is really it that I wanted to talk to you about the water issues. I will be very glad to take any questions or any comments or any suggestions if any of you have. Thank you so much for listening.
Oh, thank you very much. Can you turn off the, so we can see people's faces, the PowerPoint? There we go. The cost of treating brackish water or saline water is kind of expensive, isn't it?
That's true. That is true. So that is one of the important aspect. So people are trying to work on using the renewable energy sources. And so yeah, right now, not much of, some success are there. But yeah, if we can use renewable sources of energy, that might bring down the cost of the desalination. The other thing is that desalination cost is also a function of the salinity of the original water. If the original water is like 100,000 parts per million, it's a lot more expensive than when the source water is 10,000 parts per million. So, but that is a very valid concern right now.
Because urban areas and cities, I mean, like Las Cruces and so forth, we could afford to do some treatment, but for agriculture, they can't, because they got a close margin on those crops, many of them. And so they can't spend a lot of money on desalinating water.
So basically, if you have, like, for example, this new plant which is coming in Alamogordo, so that new plant will be able to meet almost like 70% of the water demand of the city of Alamogordo. If you go to Brownsville in Texas, 70% of the water demand of the Brownsville city is met through desalination. So once we have desalination on that scale, at that time, probably, of course, the current price of water is going to change. It will increase. And so that's another question, whether the farmers will like it or not. Yeah, Dave, go ahead, please.
On the subject of cost, if you said today a farmer that gets, I don't know, his or her allotment of water pays, I don't know, 2 cents a cubic meter, what would that person pay if they were on the reverse osmosis water for the same volume of water?
So again, it will be a function of how much land he owns and how much water he will be applying in 1 year and how much water he is getting from EBID. So if he is not getting any water from EBID, I think there will be initially a lot of cost for installing everything, and then plus there will be recurring costs. So we had the small research unit that we installed in Alamogordo, which can produce almost like 1 million gallons of water per day, and that unit it in itself costed us about $20,000. So all the filters and everything, but those filters have a life of at least 10 years. They can go for 15 years. So there will be a lot of initial costs of investment, and but over time, so I don't have that number. So first year will be a lot of expenses, just like the drip irrigation system. If you want to install a drip irrigation system, first year you have like $7,000-8,000 you have to spend for that system, and then that lasts for another 10 to 12 years. So subsequently you see that it's not a huge cost for the farmers with respect to the return that they are getting on their investment. So I'm sorry, I don't have exact number, but yeah, it's complicated to calculate those. Yeah, Reverend.
I also have a question, comment.
I've got one. Manoj, for these inland desalination plants, what do they do with the salt that they build up?
That is another important issue. So what they are doing in Texas, that they are putting it back into the aquifer, which is more saline than the RO concentrate. And and here in Alamogordo, they put that concentrate in the evaporation ponds. So the evaporation ponds, so all the salt stays there. So these are the two techniques. And then Bureau of Reclamation has given us some money. So we are actually doing some research on using the RO concentrate to grow halophytes. Now, RO has a lot of salt. So, if we apply it into an agricultural field, of course, we'll be salinizing it very rapidly. But we live in the state of New Mexico where, we have a big problem of desertification. So we really believe that there is a lot of scope of, using some of these agronomic measures to control the desertification. Because if you ask any expert who works on desert, he will tell you that the desert is headed towards Albuquerque. And if you go to Socorro, all the way up to Socorro, there are very clear evidence that desertification is taking place. You can see on the southern slopes, black grama grass is dying. It has almost reached Socorro. That's where some opportunities are, that we can use this RO concentrate. Now, Tom, there will be issues related to how to transport this water to those locations. So definitely, cost is an issue here. But if the situation becomes so dire that can we sustain pecans or can we sustain chili using that same water? Probably under those circumstances, we will have no other option but to use some or the other technology to desalinate the water. And hopefully these costs will come down as they are coming for every other treatments.
Anyone else have a comment, question?
Reverend has a hand up, so.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Since you were mentioning chilies and tomatoes and such, is there research on the way to breed these plants that can sustain themselves with water that has more salts in them?
Yes, exactly. So, chili breeders are working on both aspects. They are trying to work on the drought resistant chili, and they are also trying to, work on can they genetically modify so that, they become more salt tolerant? Yes.
Oh,
so both research are ongoing. Yeah. Yeah, Rosemary.
I have a different question, and I know that the Mesilla Valley is because of agriculture. Last week, I took a trip up to Hatch, and there's so many new pecan orchards. And then we went down south towards El Paso, and more pecan orchards. Is there? Should we have some kind of moratorium on new pecan orchards, or they're just because pecans is a crop that just takes so much more water? And we were looking at your table, and it's obvious. Can we do something about the number of pecan orchards that are being planted? I don't know if that's a good question. It's what?
That actually is a question. I think probably our governor would be able to answer this question, better than I can answer. Because if you look at the water problem that we are facing, of course, it will not be sustainable. And some of these orchards are brand new orchards.
Yeah.
And if you look at the pecans, it takes really 8 or 9 years before you start getting the benefit of the harvest. So unless the situation drastically changes, the same problem is at the Arizona-New Mexico border. And you will not believe it, or you may already know that there are a lot of investment made by East Coast doctors. So, there are 7 or 8 different doctors, and they put together the money, bought the land in Arizona, and they have new orchards. So in last 7-8 years, several new orchards have come up there, which are owned by, people who do not even come visit that area. And okay, Arizona does have a very large aquifer and they can sustain the irrigation, but for how long? Is it 20 years or is it 100 years? We don't know. So that, Rosemary, that's a very important issue. Should we or should we not go for pecan orchards?
I have a plan part two for my question. How did the switch happen from, we were known for all the chili production and cotton, and now we're pretty much pecans. How did that happen and why?
So
Because they make more money in pecans.
that is definitely one of the reason, but more important reason is related to labor. So
Yeah.
labor shortage became such a big issue. And I think for 15 years, people are trying to develop mechanical harvester for chili, but they are not successful because, it's very difficult because the way we harvest the chili, there is that stem after the chili pod, it has to be cut at a certain place. Otherwise the quality goes down.
Yep.
And then your chili, you will not be able to sell it, other than making some salsa and those things, that chili will not be useful.
Yeah.
So that is such a big issue, and labor, and that's why China became number one. They overtook us because of the labor issues.
Yeah.
Less acreage, came under chili. Pecans are much more easy to harvest because, still we harvest pecan just shaking the trees. So therefore you don't need that much labor for pecan. And that was one of the reason, other than, of course, the amount of money that you can make from the pecans.
Yeah. Thank you, Manoj.
I have a
Anyone else?
question.
Yeah.
I wondered, last week I was talking to a couple of people who were mentioning that there was some agreement between New Mexico and Texas, and that they were lowering the level of water in Elephant Butte because the water was, I guess, on loan, or we had to pay back water to Texas. So I'm wondering, what is the impact of the agreements between the states on the water level in the water irrigation here in New Mexico?
So I'm not sure what exactly you meant by lowering the water level in Elephant Butte, because the way I
They were draining it. Someone said they were draining the water because they had to flow over to Texas because that water had been given to us, or somehow, I guess, a pass through from Colorado based on the agreements between the states. So much water had to go over to Texas.
Yes, that is true. So there are actually two different compact. One of the compact is with the Rio Grande River Basin, another is with the Colorado River Basin. So the one with the Rio Grande River Basin, we have a compact with Texas and we have a compact with Mexico. So and because of this, we have to release the water. A certain amount of water has to reach the Texas border. There they measure it, and then a certain amount of water has to reach the international border. So, and of course, that actual numbers fluctuate based upon the total availability. Now, the one other problem that is the one of the major reason why we have this lawsuit with Texas, because some of you, is anybody who has lived here for 50 years?
Not me.
You have some of you. So, 50, 60 years ago, there were like 5,000 tube wells, maybe 500 tube wells in the entire Rio Grande area, basin area. Now, those are like, 8,000, 9,000 wells, or even more than that, could be maybe, 15,000. I exactly do not remember the count today. So that therefore, that's one of the reasons Texas says that, you are pumping so much water that is essentially not yours. Because when water table is shallow, you only need so much water. to raise the water level, and Texas gets the rest of it. But when your water table is down, you are storing a larger amount of water here in your aquifers. So sometimes when you are a New Mexican, you support New Mexico, but sometimes when you see those presentations, you do it. There are some issues.
Anyone else?
This is Dave again. How do you, if you own 50 acres for a pecan orchard, do you have any limitation on how much water you can pull out of the ground that's under your orchard? And if so, how is that done?
So, so Dave, this is a very good question. 10 years ago, there was no regulation. 10 years ago, there was no meter on the tube wells. But in the last 10 years, every single tube well now has a meter. So the way this, the EBID versus pumping works, that EBID will provide 36 acre inch per acre of water. And generally the allotment is about 5 feet, which is about 60 inches. So after that 60 minus 36, the farmers can pump so that, they can have their 5 inch of water. But if EBID is only able to provide 4, then farmers are allowed to, extract all the way until it's 60. So, but of course, I don't think they really go all the way up to 60. Then there was another problem 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was like this, that this is your water allocation. If you do not use it, you will lose it. And people were afraid that if I use less water, maybe 2-3 years down the road, the state will say that, hey, you only need 50. Why should we give you 60? So those types of problems in the regulations were there. But since then, talking to EBID, those engineers are telling these days that no, your allocation is not going to change. It will not be a function of how much you use. Nowadays, a lot of changes have taken place. If you do not want to use your water, you can actually give it to someone else. It's lot more, EBID is a lot more flexible now than they were about 10 years ago. So yeah, to answer your question, really they can pump this difference. If EBID gives them 10, they can pump 50. But there is a meter that is monitored. So if they exceed it, then there could be, I don't know what are the consequences, but there could be consequences for over pumping.
It should be.
I have a question. I wonder, Doctor, how does your work or the work of someone like Joel Brown at our congregation impact the policy that impacts these water issues and irrigation?
Yeah, so like the work we do, then the people in the civil engineering do, the people in the other, College of Arts and Sciences do, the economics do. Sometimes what happens is that we are called for testimonies. So at that time, we have to give them, whenever we are called, whatever we have done through our research. And most of the times, we are, as a faculty, each one of us is required to publish our research in peer-reviewed journals. And therefore, we make them the copies of those papers available because, since it has been reviewed by the peers, so those research results are much more acceptable. So whenever we are called, we do go and give the testimonies. The other thing that we are doing it that, like, for example, I don't know, here in Las Cruces, New Mexico State University has 2 research farms. One of them is in Masiha, known as the Line-Daker Plant Science Center, and the another one is the Fabian Garcia Science Center. So in those 2 research centers, we do different types of research, like last year, just when the COVID started, at that time, we started a new project with Israel where we are using a gravity drip irrigation system. So, instead of using that pressurized drip system, which is a lot more expensive, we are trying to use the gravity drip irrigation system. And we have a young pecan orchard, like 1.6 acres of pecan, and then, remaining 1.6 acres under chili. So, we are doing those research, and during the field days when the farmers come to us, and last year we have also done these Zoom sessions with the growers here and try to show them that, we are able to save, like, for example, we needed or close to 750 millimeters of water to grow chili and get the same yield as a furrow irrigated chili, which required almost like, 1100 millimeters of water. So we do show the growers, we talk to them that, these are the opportunities. When you look at the pressurized drip system, it is like $3,000 per acre. A gravity drip irrigation system is only $800 to $900 per acre. So we show them the economics, we show them the research results, and yeah, hopefully, some of those things will change. And there is a need to change. So, people do understand. Hopefully, yeah, please go ahead.
Approximately how much water evaporates from surface, irrigation? What percentage of that water just goes up into the sky?
That's a very, very important question, because when we are doing the flood irrigation, so evaporation is a function of the surface area. So when we are doing the flood irrigation, especially in the early days, when there are less leaves in the trees, and therefore, most of our surface is exposed, at that time, we lose quite a bit of water. Surface water has a efficiency of about 60%. So you can see that we lose 40% of water, maybe 10 to 12% goes in as deep percolation. Rest of it is lost to evaporation. So we lose very significant amount. And that's why when we go from flood to furrow, now we are able to decrease the surface area, and therefore we are able to decrease the evaporation. And if we go with subsurface drip, we can further decrease the evaporation.
Are there regulations that require growers to use those mitigating methods to reduce the wastage?
No, Miss, and that is a very, again, a very good question, because number one, there are no regulations. As long as the farmer is using the allocation, he or she is not exceeding the allocation, so they are not breaking any law. Number two is that when you talk to some people, they will say that deep percolation is not a loss. It is just going to the groundwater aquifer, which we can reuse it. Makes a lot of sense. The only difference is that when you pump, you need energy, and you have to spend money. So, yeah, but there is no regulation because farmer themselves cannot control evaporation unless, of course, they change the method of irrigation.
I'm wondering one more thing. We know that in the last administration, there was a fair amount of politicization of research, especially around in the medical field at the CDC. We saw that in the last part of the administration, where they were trying to even prevent education policy that allowed certain histories to be taught in school. So I'm wondering whether your research is also subject to this political pressure.
So not just with the last administration. Overall, research dollars for research have gone down. Overall dollars have gone down consistently. I tell you the example of my professor when I did my PhD under the Professor Don Nielsen from UC Davis. And Don Nielsen used to tell us always that in his career, all he needed to do was to write a 2-page proposal and get the money for research. That's it. If you can write 2-page proposal, you will have money to do the research. And now we write 20-page proposals, and our success rates are only 5%. Means you write 20 proposals, and if you get 2 funded, that is considered as a very good rate. So overall, if we compare ourselves to China, right now the China is in that situation that you write a 2-page proposal and you get the money. But we really have moved away from that.
I was also referring to what can be published in terms of what will they allow you to get into print or to be dispersed, distributed to the academic community.
For those, I think in general, US government never interferes in what we are trying to publish. The only constraint we have is that when we are collaborating with a private company, and if we are getting our research dollars through a private company, so those private companies will first like to see what exactly our results are. Sometimes, we do have to sign those non-disclosure agreements. So yeah, private companies can stop us, but for my experience of last 20 years here in the United States, I have never seen any interference from the government or from the university officials about how and what or if you can publish or not. But then I do not work in the highly sensitive security fields. If you are working for very sensitive fields, probably government might be once in a while interjecting.
So do you collaborate with researchers in other areas in the world that are also situated in desert areas, so you can
Yes.
work on a worldwide problem, because that seems to be what we're discussing, driving migration, and will be in the foreseeable future.
So this is a good question. Yes,
Food
the short answer
insecurity,
is
that kind of stuff.
short answer is yes. And then the US has a lot of different types of funding opportunities for the international collaboration. Like we have programs through Cochrane Fellowship, where we can actually invite these people from a foreign country to come to us, and then we provide them the training on whatever we are doing. Training could be related to irrigation, it could be related to genetics, it could be related to crops, it could be related to infrastructure development. And then there are a lot of small assistance available through the US consulates in many of these countries, where you can apply for a small grant. For example, we recently submitted a grant with Uruguay, where US consulate will give us $25,000, and we will help Uruguay University do some work on digital agriculture. Last week, we submitted a proposal through, there is a program known as Farmer to Farmer, F2F programs. Through that program, we have submitted a project for Mexico and another project for Paraguay. And essentially that is close to $200,000 type of a projects, where all that money will be spent in Paraguay, so that we can improve the life of these small and marginal farmers. Right now, we are also working on a USAID project, which is a $20 million project. And if that whosoever is funded, they will be working with Jordan, because like I mentioned, Jordan is one of the poorest country in terms of the water resources. So those $20 million will be spent in Jordan to expand their capacity building and develop some new infrastructure, so that their water problems, if it's not solved, at least those problems are alleviated as much as possible. So yeah, US government encourages people to collaborate all over the place. Same thing is also true with other different countries. European unions have a lot of projects where we can participate and collaborate. There are projects from Chinese government, where they do not let us take any money and bring to the US, but that money has to be spent in China. 3 years ago, they hosted our graduate students, almost 7 graduate students, showed them their research and everything, and they paid for everything for all our students, stay there for 10 days. And so, yeah, international level, lot of collaboration. And it did not stop in the previous administration. It did not stop before that. So I have never seen anything with regard to the research getting blocked by any of our
I
administrations.
just want to,
So nobody out there needs to reinvent the wheel. You can just steal good ideas from anybody out there.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Research
Right.
is like this, but then when you go into the sensitive areas like defense or like
Oh,
some
sure.
of the medical research, that's where there are a lot more restrictions. But for
Sure.
agriculture, I think it is, we are not allowed to bring soil or plants from a foreign country. But otherwise, as far as the technology is concerned, generally there are no restrictions.
I just want to ask a very general question. In the whole Southwest, including Arizona, California, Colorado, Nebraska, we're having a serious drought. And as we look forward, I'm looking out, 10, 20, 30 years. And if we don't get monsoons like we used to, there's some real problems out there. And I think agriculture in the desert areas is going to suffer.
Absolutely. And not only us, even if we
Well, no,
get
not
our,
just us, but
yeah. So even if we get our monsoons back, we really rely on the rainfall in Colorado.
yeah.
When we hear that it snowed in Colorado, we are very happy because we know that runoff will eventually come to us. So, so
But
yeah.
I'm just, if this continues like it is now, and especially agriculture, I think cities, they can afford to, desalinate water and do whatever they have to because each individual household, it doesn't amount to a lot. But for a farmer, that's different.
Yeah, that is going to be the way in California, if you remember that when this big drought happened, farmer has to use only a portion of their land to grow the
Yeah.
crop because they did not have enough water. So yeah, if the problem continues here, definitely the acreage under agriculture will go down. And then we have to really look at the bigger problem. If we leave our land fallow and we
Yeah.
get so much wind here, and then
Oh, yeah.
all of those particle dust will become airborne, and it will be a serious detriment to the quality of life in our area. Yeah.
Well, we've ran over our time a little bit. I think that we need to cut this off. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Manoj.
Excellent program. Very well done. So next week, we're going to have Charlie set this up, and we're going to have a firing line with Charles Blow, and we're going to talk about a Black Power manifesto. So it should be very interesting.
All right.
Is Charles Blow going to be
Thank you.
here?
Thanks,
Is Charles Blow
everybody.
going to be here?
No.
Okay, all right.
Oh, no.
Got it. All right. Just
I
wanna make
It's a
sure.
tape, isn't it? Charlie, you gotta tell them.
Yeah, I wish. No, we'll look at the a firing line interview, and he has a book.
Bye.
It is very insightful. He is an amazing author and columnist. So what we'll do is watch the Margaret Hoover's firing line interview with him, and then we'll have a chance to discuss some of his ideas. He's extremely insightful.
Very good.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
You do.